Okay, so this is a viewer request from Michael. One sec. Yeah, okay. I'm not, or Michael. I didn't know if it was Michael or Mikhail because of the last name, and because Russian speaking. So, I was asked to react to this video. It's about discussing the Iran-Iraq War, which was, I believe, in 1980. This specific video that was requested was Kraken Serafina. From Nora Gets Gamer to this. This is an interesting video. Queen Serafina. Oh, okay. Oh, I wonder if that's Nora. I wonder if I know who that Nora is. Anyway, so we're gonna jump in. I kept some basic dates. I wrote them down just so that I wouldn't forget. Obviously, the most important thing is the Iran-Iraq War. If this is talking about the historical one, it was from 1980 to 1988. So obviously, Iran, Iraq, next to each other in the Middle East. Both are Shia majority countries, but I believe at this time it was Iraq was still being ruled over by the Ba'athist Party. And Ba'athists were Sunni majority. Their planks were kind of centered around Arab unity, Arab freedom from outside control, and they had socialist aspects. I believe the Ba'athist Party in Syria was a little bit more secular, where the one in Iraq was a little bit more inspired by fundamentalist Islam. Iran, this would have been a year and a half maybe after the Ayatollah took control, and Iran was sent back to the Dark Ages under the Islamic State, because that transfer of power basically happened in 1979. This happened in 1980. I don't know exactly what time of year either of those happened. So it was anywhere from within a year to within a year and a half, probably. Iran also Shia majority, even before, I mean, nowadays it's easy to say, oh yeah, they're 98%, but that's because if you are apostate, they kill you. And if you're not a Shia Muslim, then you are in trouble, or you can't have certain rights or certain privileges. So the other important thing to note is that Iran is ethnically Persian, not Arab. There is a difference there. And I know about the war just as a thing that happened. I don't really know much about it specifics wise. So if there are things that don't make sense to me, or things that I decide, I need to provide more context, or I'm going to do like a little bit of a deep dive, I will probably post that as a follow-up to this video, where I will delve in into anything that I find confusing or maybe even problematic. So yeah, without further ado, let's jump in to discussing the Iran-Iraq War, which I believe is, this is a shorter video. It's just 13 minutes, but it's the analysis of the war from another VTuber, apparently, or another commentary personality on YouTube.
Deep in Iranian territory, Iraqi armor chalks up fresh successes on the battlefield. For once, an Arab army is inflicting territorial loss on the enemy. The enmity here between Arab and Persian, as old as that between Arab and Jew. A border war that started months ago with fretful skirmishes. A war that no one now seems able to stop. A war that still threatens the world.
From 1980 to 1988, a devastating war was fought between Iran and Iraq. A war so devastating it would cause both combatants over an estimated $1 trillion in financial loss. Oof. What makes it even worse is the fact that virtually nothing changed when the conflict finally ended in 1988. There was no reparations, no border changes.
I'm just, speaking from a historical standpoint, I want to see how Kuwait is involved in this, because obviously that led to the first Gulf War, where I think it was George Bush Sr. went in and curb stomped what was at the time, I think they were considered like the fourth or fifth most powerful military in the world. The Iraq military was, and it was completely dismantled. Well, it was completely subjugated within like a matter of like 2 weeks, but it was really done within like 3 days. And then it was just like going through and trying to oust little pockets of resistance. And I believe the only, like, that was kind of the debut, I believe, of the Abrams tank as like the main battle tank for U.S. Armed Forces. And there was not a single one destroyed, and one was disabled because they jumped a ditch going like 60 miles an hour and they threw a track. And that was it. That was the only like loss that was incurred by the U.S. armor divisions, which is kind of wild. And then obviously Iran, this would have been in the, well, no, it's probably in the 80s or the 90s. It's that very famous Fat Electrician video where he talks about proportional, like keeping the revenge proportional, because Iran was, oil control and people were buying from Kuwait, and then all this stuff happened, and then they did the one thing that you should never do, which is, well, one of two things that you should never do, which is get between America and oil and touch American boats. So Iran fucked around and they found out, and the U.S. Armed Forces destroyed like half of their navy and downed a like an F-4, like or a Su-4 fighter in the span of like 6 hours. So we completely decimated them. So that would have been obviously after this. I think it was in the like late 80s, 90s, but. So it's going to be kind of a meme if Kuwait is somehow also involved, because it was the Kuwait and Qatar, I think, were having like offshore drilling and all that stuff, and it was pissing off Iran because of like OPEC and like other things like that.
Just a ceasefire along hundreds of thousands of dead. It only feels as of recent that some people have decided to talk about this war because, well, nobody has talked about it in the past 20 years. Well, until recently, it feels. On July the 17th, 1968, there was a coup that happened in Iraq. Led by Ahmed Hassan al-Bakr, his Iraqi Ba'ath Party would seize power, placing himself as president and Saddam Hussein as vice president. Over the course of the next decade, Saddam would accumulate a lot of political power within Iraq.
The face of the man who took the Iraqi people to war gazes out from posters all over Baghdad. Saddam Hussein al-Takriti, president in name for the past 14 months, but Iraq's strongman for the past decade. Variously attired in bespoke lounge suit, or as popular hero in Arab headdress, or in the uniform of a field marshal, although he was never a soldier, sometimes depicted as the sweaty labourer with shovel to hand, but his favourite image, the cuddly father figure.
There you can kind of see the socialist, like, kind of peppering in the Ba'athist propaganda, or like the, well, yeah, I guess you could call it propaganda, but yeah, like where it's that idea of we're being led by a common man, we're being led by a laborer, we're being led by, so that's just kind of that concept of social connectivity, social safety net, socialism. And, in this ideology, it was married to the concept of Arab, Arabness. So, yeah, like that's it. Very evident through their
Saddam would eventually become president in 1979, and the Ba'ath Party would suffer a major purge. Hundreds of Ba'ath Party members were executed in a bid for power. Despite Saddam's seizure of power, there was still much problems for Iraq internally. Saddam's government was Sunni, while the majority of the Iraqi population were Shia. Saddam's party
was like I think it was about like 2/3 to 1/3. So it was, and obviously that's the Kurds, who would have been living in the north tip of like Iraq. They account for a tiny percent of the population, like maybe only 2% or 3% or something. I'm not sure exactly, but I believe it's like 2/3 Shia, 1/3 Sunni, which is kind of that weird thing where the ruling party that had control was was Sunni. They were the minority religion. So
Also well known for their Arab nationalism. The only problem with that is that significant portions of the population of Iraq were not Arab. Most notably, the Kurds in northern Iraq repeatedly fought against a Ba'ath government. Despite these internal setbacks, Saddam's government maintained authority. Around the same time in Iran in
this is completely irrelevant, and I realize that I'm 10 minutes in, and it's only been 2.5 minutes into the video, but it's such a shame that we did not give, not we, but I guess we, like, ancestors, whatever, in the wake of World War II, I forget what that treaty was called, where they basically, parted out the Middle East, Africa, everything, and they basically drew political lines across ethnic and religious and cultural lines intentionally to hamstring the development of the Middle East and Africa. And I feel for the Kurds. We went in college, we had a course that was very interesting. It was called the history of social movements. And so it basically, we looked at, like a dozen different examples of social movements over the years, everything from Mahatma Gandhi in India, to the Zapatistas in southern Mexico, to the Kurds in, southern Turkey, northern Iraq, like that region. And, I really empathized a lot with the Kurds, just from a, from a cultural standpoint, but also just from, what happened to them was a direct result of the borders and boundaries that were drawn after World War II. And obviously that also goes to a lot of African nations, and a lot of problems going on in, like, Sudan, Ethiopia. You can trace a lot of it back to lumping people together who were never historically together and were historically enemies, and then just kind of going, oh, okay, see ya, bye, we're going back to Europe. So, yeah.
1978 to 1979, a revolution took place that overthrew the government of the Pahlavi dynasty. Iran's leader, the Shah Mohammad Reza Pahlavi, was seen as a common enemy by the Iraqi government.
So this is
Pahlavi's
in
government
79.
heavily aligned with the Western Bloc during the Cold War. The United States, of course, was a huge international backer for the Shah, which included millions upon millions of dollars in U.S. weapons. The Shah's rule of Iran would of course end in 1979, when his government was successfully overthrown, establishing the Islamic Republic of Iran, headed by the Ayatollah or Supreme Leader Ruhollah Khomeini. The sudden result of the revolution naturally alarmed Saddam's government. Since I mentioned earlier that the majority of the population of Iraq was Shia, and the Islamic Republic of Iran was obviously a Shia theocratic government, this might have presented a small threat to Saddam's government. This is also on top of the fact that there was a long-running history of territorial border disputes between Iran and Iraq, such as the Shatt al-Arab dispute, which took place from 1936 all the way till 1975. However, it came to the point in 1980 where Saddam decided to invade Iran. It's widely accepted that one of Saddam's major goals for the war was to capture the province of Khuzestan in Iran. Saddam's government was hoping that the substantial Arab population of Khuzestan would support him. Saddam, of course, would publicly deny this motivation, but it is generally accepted that Saddam was looking to take advantage of Iran's chaos. Even before the war,
without knowing too much about that, I mean, that would make perfect sense as a war goal, especially if ethnically they are Arab. Obviously, the Baathists supporting Arab unison, Arab uniting, freeing Arabs from non-Arab influence, which, your first thought goes to Western influence, but obviously, Persian, like majority Persian country, that would also fall under that category. And then obviously coastline is always important as well, like in the Straits of Hormuz going into the Persian Gulf. That's very, very important. The more ports you can control, the more trade you can control, which is then the, that is directly tied to, economic improvement and bringing wealth to your nation, right? So obviously, Kuwait, but then they've only got the I forget what this is. It Basra? No, it's I forgot what that port's called. But yeah, like if there's, even if there's 1 or 2 port cities in that whatever stan that he called Kyrgyzstan province, like that would be an exceptionally smart war goal to try to take, because it checks several boxes. I would say that it's very dumb to try to get involved in a land war with Iran, just because of mountainous terrain. It's so inhospitable. They have a huge population. Like I forget what it is, but they're top 10 population. Like, I think Westerners just kind of, not recently because it's been in the news, but they just kind of forget about how big Iran is in terms of production, population, economy. Tehran is, I've actually, I'll look that up because I don't want to be completely wrong about that, but I'm pretty sure it's like close to New York or bigger. Tehran population 2025. Yeah, it's 9.7 to 9.8 million people, and the metro area is 14 to 16 million. So it's literally the size of New York. Tehran, right? And it's just this thing where Americans in general are not particularly well traveled. So we think of so much of the, Middle East, areas of Asia, Africa, like they're significantly larger cities than we really would expect. And part of that is because we have so much land in America that, they can afford to spread out, right? Like for example, let me just double check the number for Abuja, which is the capital of Nigeria. 4.2 million. 4.2 million people in Nigeria live in their capital city. And then Lagos, which is their actual largest city, is 12.5 to like 14 million people in the actual city. So think about that, right? That's New York with Chicago and Detroit like put on top of it, and then probably also like Boston or Philly. And that's in Nigeria. But in your head, you just think of it as, oh, it's probably everybody's in huts, in the Serengeti. And it's like, well, no, they're in, the Ivory Coast. They're on the west coast of Africa. It's completely different. It's tropical, like all that good stuff. But anyway,
started in late
we're now only 4 minutes into the video, and I'm
September of
18 minutes into recording.
There was already border conflicts where Iraq was forcibly reclaiming territories in Zayn al-Qaz and Saif Saad. Due to this aggression, both Iran and Iraq declared the Treaty of 1975, or referred to as the Algiers Agreement, was now null and void. The Iraqi full-scale invasion would then commence on September the 22nd, 1980. Now, over the course of the first 3 months of the war, the Iraqi military did gain ground, but by December of the same year, the invasion had effectively stalled. The Iranian military was able to regroup, and they basically took back all of the gains that the Iraqis took by 1982. The hopeful decisive victory over Iran that Iraq was hoping for evaporated pretty quickly.
Yep.
The war would then carry
stuck
on for another 6 years, with both states trading blows against each other. It would get to the point where the Iranians would counter-invade into Iraq. However, Iraqi counteroffensives would ultimately push them out later in 1988. And of course, again, it is worthy to note that basically nothing really changed as a result of the war. I already mentioned the fact that hundreds of thousands died, and the financial loss for both states was absolutely immense. It's also worthy of note that Iraq, as a result of the war, also owed a ton of money to the state of Kuwait, which would lead into something else that we're not going to talk about today. The war, of course, was also known for its sheer brutality and war crimes. The Iraqi military infamously used tons of chemical weapons on Iranian military targets as well as civilians.
The prospect of Basra being cut off eventually panicked Iraqi leaders into widespread use of
I was right,
chemical
Basra.
weapons.
Basra.
Iranian gas masks afforded little protection, and chemical weapons, more than any other Iraqi ordnance, were responsible for extensive Iranian battlefield casualties.
Okay, so that's an interesting phrasing right there, where they say casualties, right? So casualties are not necessarily deaths. It's just you've been removed from the fight, right? So it makes me wonder, when you can just say chemical weapons, right? Well, that could be tear gas, that could be mustard gas, that could be Zyklon B, that could be, that could be white phosphorus. Like, there's a wide range of things that could fall under that, right? Technically, if I sprayed somebody in the face with a spray bottle of bleach, that's a chemical attack, right? So, again, that's actually something that I would want to look up and just see exactly what chemicals were used, whether they caused casualties or actual fatalities. Just because it's a very specific way to frame information that leaves people with an impression that isn't necessarily true. Where, you say, oh, they used chemical weapons that caused mass casualties. And in your head you go, oh, they killed tens of thousands of people with a dangerous poisonous gas that burned their lungs and killed them all. And it's like, that might be the case. I have no idea. Obviously that still violates the Geneva Convention regardless, but looking at the actual usage and statistics, it's like, okay, well, was it tear gas, right? Oh, they try to flush them out of fortified positions using tear gas, and then try to fight them in better terrain, something like that. Like, I'm not sure, but that's something that I think I'm gonna put in. Now I'm gonna make a part 2, so whatever.
Mustard gas and nerve agents were delivered by small, innocent-looking planes based near Baghdad.
So nerve
ITN's
agents,
cameras
that's not good.
were prevented from filming more of them. At first, the scale of its use surprised the Iranians, who were forbidden by Ayatollah Khomeini from following suit. In contrast, the chemicals that injured these people had been developed in Iraq under Saddam Hussein's personal supervision. At first, the world ignored the evidence, but in time, chemicals would be used in a manner that would shock international opinion.
Among those chemical weapons used by the Iraqi military, most of them were known as neurotoxin or nerve agents like tabun, sarin, and mustard gas.
Yeah, sarin
there's
gas.
a pretty good reason why these would be considered war crimes among the international community. Now, as I mentioned, the Iraqi military also used chemical weapons against Iranian civilians. At bare minimum, 30 attacks have been recorded on Iranian civilians. Not only that, there were many civilians within Iraq that were affected by these attacks as well, most notoriously in the Halabja massacre. The Iraqi government used tons of mustard gas and other nerve agents against Kurdish civilians. This resulted in up to 5,000 people being killed, injuring 7,000 to 10,000 more, and resulting in more pain and suffering with the people who were affected years ahead of time. However, just because Iraq was criticized widely for its...
That must be so difficult, concluding like mustard gas, but trying to identify, like at that point, you're mainly looking at the symptoms, right? What's happening to the victim of the attack. And yeah, like it might be 90% similar, like if there are like chemical residue, or if there is chemical residue, it might be 90% similar to a known compound, but there's a 10% difference. Or, if you have mixed samples, a lot of times that prevents you from identifying because they're mixed, right? If multiple things were being used at the same time. I wonder if we ever found out. Probably not, because, I would assume that this was a recent article, and it's still labeled as unidentified.
Who were affected years ahead of time.
So I decided to cut it right there, and I'm just going to upload it in 2 parts, and then I'll do a third part that'll be like more of a deep dive and analysis, and then I got clarification on what my follower wanted me to actually talk about, so that'll be in part 3.